Welcome back to the Unikaksha. So today we are going to talk about a topic called as Introduction to the SQL. SQL is a term called as Structured Query Language, which is related to the database management system. And that may arise a question in your mind, what the data is all about. Data is also called as a new oil of the today. Data is something that everyone is running behind. How to manage the data, how to manipulate the data, how to effectively use the data, how to analyze the data, how to visualize the data. So these are some of the very common questions that are there in every industry because we have huge amount of data generated, but we are slightly clueless that how to handle this huge amount of data. And out of that, the one very biggest problem is how to store this data effectively so that whenever required, we can fetch the data very easily. So in order to give answers to all these questions, there exist some systems called as database management system. So as the name indicates, it manages your data, it handles your data. It's nothing but a system that sophistically stores your data and retrieves the data in a very correct way whenever required. So basically, what do we mean by data? Data is anything that is created out of your transactions, out of your daily activities, out of the surveys, and so many other things. There are always two things which people interchange with each other. One is data and one is information. Data is something which is a raw data point. It is generated by each and every day's activity, and information is something that we extract from the data. So whenever we get something knowledgeable out of data, we extract that from the data and that becomes information for us. Data can be structured, unstructured, or it can be semi-structured as well. What do we mean by structured data? It is one of the most famous type of a data. So for example, if you have looked at any Excel file, which consists of student information, so it might have information such as ID, first name, last name, phone number, age, height of the student, and so on. Now, in this case, we don't want first name to have a numerical type of entities. We don't want phone number to have a character type of entities. That means for every column, we are defining that what kind of information we expect in that data. So this is basically what we mean by structured type of data, where you are already aware in every column which information you are going to add. On the other hand, there are few types of data such as images, audio, video, where we cannot say that, okay, I'm going to get the image of this colors only, or I'm going to get an image of this particular dimension only. We cannot say about that what is going to be the color, what is going to be the intensity, what is going to be the size, what is going to be the format of that data. Then such type of data can be called as a unstructured data. And something in between the structured and unstructured is a semi-structured data. So if you are aware about something called as the XML, which is not a programming language, but a scripting language yet. So that is nothing but an example of semi-structured data, where suppose you want to store the image, that image is also stored in tag. So the tag acts as a structured, and the image that you store inside that tag is nothing but unstructured type of data. So the combination of the structured and unstructured makes the information as a semi-structured information. Then comes the next question. Now, what is database management system, or basically what is database? Database is a systematic collection of the data where we can store the data, where we can manipulate our data, where we can handle the data in a most effective and correct way. So the analogical example is a telephone directory that we have in our mobile phones. So whenever required, we can search for a particular contact, we can call that contact. If required, you can update the value of the, suppose say, name, of the number, location, or whatever information that you have stored along with that contact. You can update that information. You can add a new number inside the existing number as well. So all these things you can perform on that data. That means you are managing that data in a more effective way. This is basically what we mean by database systems. There are various types of the databases, such as distributed database, where the information is not stored in a single database, but it is distributedly stored into the multiple databases. So as and when required, we can get the information and we can use that information for the purpose. Relational databases, for example, you're having the relational database for library management system. So you might have some entities such as student, librarian, then book, issue. So you know that a student and book is related as one to many. That means one student can go for a many book. So whenever you have the entities and if you can establish a relationship in between your entities, then that type of database is called as a relational database. Object-oriented databases are those databases where we can implement the concepts of the object-oriented programming. Open source database are nothing but the free and open source databases that can be used freely, that can be accessed from any point of the world. Cloud databases are again the type of the database where it is not required to store your database on your local machine. It can be stored anywhere on a cloud and you can get access to that information using your internet. Data warehouse is a collection of a huge amount of the data. So if you are having a lot of tables and there is a complicated huge amount of data you want to store, then in such cases we go for the systems called as data warehouse. What are the advantages of using database management system? First of all, it is a, what you can say, a technique in which you can very lucidly store your data as well as you can retrieve the data very easily. It's very efficient to handle any complicated kind of a task. You can write the queries, you can write the nested queries, and you can retrieve whatever information that you want to extract from the entire data pool that is provided. Then it's possible to have a uniform administration of the data. That means the queries are going to remain same. If I am handling the data, I have to run the similar type of query in order to get the same answer. And if you want to also get the similar type of result from your query, you also have to type a similar query. That means there is a uniformation of a process whenever we use the database management system. It consists of a very powerful functionalities to store as well as to retrieve the data very quickly. It allows you to have a data integrity. That means you can create multiple tables. You can integrate all those tables together. You can have some logical relationship in between the tables together. And you can have a secure database. That means you can lock your database. You may not permit user to make some changes into the data of the database. So all these things increases the integrity as well as the security of particular database. It has reduced the application development time because once your backend is created, when your database is created, it becomes very easy for a UI or user interface engineer to perform the front end or to create the front end of any application. Along with the advantages, there are few disadvantages. The first is you need to have a particular hardware or particular software in order to run the database management system. Generally, you need to have a machine with a good configuration if you're having a huge data and you are using database management system in order to handle that huge data. You need to give proper training to your users in order to handle the database correctly. You need to check the time to time updations if happening in the data, how they are happening inside the data. If no one is adding some unrequired kind of information, or the information is not similar information is not added by the multiple users in order to create the redundancy in the data. So you have to use the concept or mechanism of lock very clearly, very in a very good way, so that you can avoid all these problems. And the simple calculations or the simple statistical formulas or calculations are not that much feasibly available whenever you are performing the query inside the database management system. So these are some of the disadvantages, but every disadvantage can be overcome, or there is a counter solution for every disadvantages of the database system. And that's why we can use the database management system in order to solve any complicated task related to the data or related to the management structured query language. So it's nothing but a language which helps you to query the data which is present inside the database. So as we know that structured query language contains the first word as a structured, then it indicates this particular SQL or structured query language can be used to manipulate the data, which is a structured data. That means the one which can be represented in terms of rows and columns. So you can create the rows, you can insert the information into those rows, you can create the column, you can insert the information into those columns, you can retrieve the specific information, you can run a lot of conditions in order to get the data. So all this data manipulation task, but on the structured data, can be implemented using SQL. There are various types of queries that we can implement in SQL. For example, DDL, which stands for data definition language, in which you can create the database or table, you can drop the tables, you can alter, you can truncate, you can write a comments, you can rename your tables that you have created. So basically, whatever you want to perform on an outer skeleton of that data, you can perform that using data definition or DDL type of queries. Then comes DQL, which stands for data query language, These consist of few of the queries which help you to retrieve the information from the data set. So one of the very famous example of such type of queries is select. So using select, you can retrieve the information that is present inside your data set. Then comes DML, which stands for data manipulation language. This particular type of queries work on the information which is present in the database or inside the table. So if you remember, we discussed about the DDL. DDL helps you to create the database structure or create the table structure. It helps you to define your columns and so on. But whenever it comes to DML, it helps you to manipulate the data which is present inside those tables. So that's basically the difference in DDL and DML. So you can insert the data inside the table using DML. You can update that data. You can delete that data. You can log that data for a better integrity as well as for the security. So these are about the few points related to the database management system that we have discussed in today's session. In the next session, we'll come up with next more exciting topic related to the data or related to this database management system. Till the time, thank you for patiently listening to the session. Thank you.